Hello and welcome. Today we are making this viral cookie dough bark that you may or may not have seen floating around in various places. Um, so this bark tends to be something of a mix of ground almonds, maple syrup, and coconut oil. And the first time that I made it, because I thought, hey, I see these recipes around, they look pretty simple, let me give it a go. The coconut oil ratio in the recipe I was following was really high, so it ended up being this kind of sloppy mess. And I thought about people like you out there making these recipes and it turning into this kind of sloppy mess and kind of not knowing what you did wrong because you followed the recipe. So I thought I'd give a go at making my own version of it, and hopefully you enjoy it. There's lots of versions floating around, and I always think it's good to try following a recipe and see how it goes, because there's a lot of learning to take place in kind of correcting it for yourself if you're able to. But just getting in the kitchen and doing stuff is helpful. It's always good when it works out, though. So for the recipe we're going to do here today, I have most of my ingredients are in this bowl, except for the almond butter, which is a liquid ingredient or a wet ingredient. So I have that and the coconut oil in separate bowls. The recipe for this is in the description below. So I'm using a mix of ground almonds and oat flour, which in comparison to the recipes floating around, which is ground almonds, it makes it a slightly lighter feeling recipe, but you are also supplementing with a bit of almond butter in there. But my coconut oil ratio is a lot lower than the stuff that I've been seeing, so it probably balances out. But the oat flour gives a kind of creaminess without having more fat, so it has a lighter after, the kind of the feel of it when you eat it is kind of a little bit on the lighter side. I'm using coconut sugar instead of maple syrup because maple syrup is like double the price of coconut sugar. And so wherever I can help people with saving money and myself saving money, I will do that. So coconut sugar is what I'm using here today, which means that I'm also using a little bit of water because coconut sugar is a dry ingredient. We're going to need the water in there to add moisture overall to the recipe. Now, you could also do a mix of maple syrup and coconut sugar where you're, 50-50 kind of thing. But if you want to not have to buy, multiple sweeteners, then you can do it this way. Otherwise, you can use things like honey, agave, if you prefer to use those kind of things. And it's quite simple. That's it in the base. You've got ground almonds, oat flour, and your sweetener of choice. And in this case, again, using coconut sugar. And then I'm making this for a friend of mine and she's in my mind when I'm making this. So I've added some winter spice to this because that's her favorite thing. So I've added ground ginger, cloves, and cinnamon powder to this to make it a sort of gingerbread, sort of winter spice kind of vibe. And with the nut butter, you can of course use any nut butter that you want. So I'm using almond butter, but you could put out, obviously you could do peanut. That would be awesome. Put some, chopped nuts through it, chopped peanuts through it. That would also be really good. Cocoa nibs as a texture through this would be really nice. The first one that I did, I put chocolate chips through it, and I just didn't like it. Like it seemed, not that I didn't like it, it just seemed overkill because there's a whole layer of chocolate on top of it. So I'm going to make this one smooth, and I made the one that I did in preparation for the class smooth as well. One last note before we start is I'm using coconut oil here, but if you wanted to, you could use cocoa butter. Cocoa butter is going to give you a better stability at room temperature, whereas coconut oil will melt more easily, or go soft anyway, more easily at room temperature, because they're just different types of oils, so they melt at different temperatures. But cocoa butter is more stable at higher room temperatures than coconut oil. So you could switch that out. And because of that, this needs to be stored in either the refrigerator or the freezer. It lasts a really long time either way. Doesn't matter if you store it in the fridge. It's going to be at least a month, if not longer. Freezer is obviously a lot longer than that. You can eat it directly from the freezer, depending on the setting of your freezer. I think mine's at about maybe minus 15 to 20. So it's not hard, like really rock hard when you take it out. But even if it's really hard, you give it 5 minutes and it's ready to be eaten. My friend, when she took it out of the freezer last time, she let it set for like 10 or 15 minutes, and she said it went fudgy. So it will be that kind of at room temperature. It will be quite soft. For me, I could eat it directly from the freezer, but I also quite like hard stuff. So it really depends on, if you're eating it from the fridge, you can eat it straight away out the fridge. But if you want to store it in the freezer, that's the situation. So I'm using just an 8x8 square tin here. You can use anything you want. You can use a flat baking tray. You can use a round tin. It doesn't matter what you use. The thing that's going to determine sort of what you want to use and the size of it is how thick or how thin you want the base to be. So this is an 8x8, 8" by 8". And so if you wanted this to be a thicker base, you'd use something smaller. If you want it to be a thinner base, you'd use something bigger. But it really doesn't matter how you do it. It's all good anyway you slice it. The last thing that we'll just quickly go over before we get started is the chocolate for the chocolate coating on top. So this is the chocolate coating that we're going to be using. I melt my chocolate on the stovetop, and whenever I'm using chocolate, and I'm a chocolatier by trade, so whenever I melt chocolate down, I do it in a pan over low heat. I don't like using a double boiler. I don't like the water, the steam. I think it's quite a little bit dangerous, and you risk getting water in the chocolate quite a lot doing that. So I don't like doing it that way. So I always do it in a warm pan, and I can hold my hand on here for quite a while without it hurting because it's not super hot. So you never want it to be really, really warm because you're going to burn the chocolate. So if you can touch it for a long time, then it's safe. Now that chocolate is mixed with coconut oil, and the difference between using coconut oil, chocolate with coconut oil, and just tempered chocolate in a recipe like this is quite significant. So if you think, oh, I'm going to temper the chocolate because I know how to do that and that's going to be brilliant. The reason that's not brilliant in this situation is because tempered chocolate, when chocolate's tempered, it shrinks, it contracts, it pulls away. So in this case, the chocolate will actually separate from the cookie dough base, and then you're not going to get what you're actually looking for from it. The other thing is that because you're going to be eating this out of the refrigerator, when you eat tempered chocolate when it's cold, it goes waxy in your mouth, particularly if it's from the freezer. So when you have untempered chocolate that has coconut oil through it, then you get this kind of really soft mouthfeel, and it melts really easily, and it feels a lot nicer, and it also adheres really well to the base. So that's why we want to use the coconut oil. It also thins your chocolate down. So often when you buy chocolate from the shop, it doesn't matter what chocolate bar we're talking about here, as long as it's properly made, which is 99.9% of the chocolate out there. When you melt it down on the stove, it's quite thick. So the coconut oil thins it, so it's also pourable. So those are the reasons for using the coconut oil. So we've got a tin here. I've lined it with cling film. You can use greaseproof paper if you prefer. I like cling film. And I'm going to put that to the side for a moment. We're going to bring our food processor over. Now, technically speaking, there's no reason that you couldn't use, that you couldn't just do this in a bowl. So if you want to do it in a bowl, if you don't have a food processor, you can also do that. There's nothing to break down. I just find this faster. The first thing I'm doing with all my dry ingredients is just getting everything well combined. So that's all that is. Now the next thing I'm going to add in is my almond butter, which again, you can use any kind of nut butter that you'd like, or seed butter. Roasted sunflower seed might be nice here. And then I've got my coconut oil here, which is just liquid. We don't want that to be set. We want that to be liquid. And that goes in. And then we're going to just blend this up. Now this is the same for me with any kind of dry mixture like this that you're going to make. If ever you see a recipe like this and then it calls for water to bring the mixture together, or maple syrup, it could be any kind of liquid, you want to go really little bit at a time just to get what you're looking for. So for right now, this is like a sandy texture, so I'll just show you what it looks like at the moment. So it hasn't come together at all, and it's very loose. And we need that to come together so that it can press into the bottom of the pan and just has a bit of moisture to it. So that's maybe a teaspoon of water. Turn your food processor on. Let it run. Let it really gather that all up. We're going to just scrape down the sides. Give that a little process before you go again. And if we look at it now, it's come together a bit more. It's starting to clump like wet sand. And if I press it in my hand, it breaks quite easily, and we don't want it to break easily. Now it forms a ball, so we've seen progression. So a touch more water in there, and we're going to do the same thing again. Little at a time. You can always add, you can't take away. It takes a lot longer to fix a mistake by just adding too much than it does to just very slowly kind of progress through. Now you can see that that's dramatically changed. So now when I press, it holds, it doesn't split, and it doesn't fall apart. So that's the perfect texture. So little by little is the way to go with that. And always go little by little. Don't worry about what the recipe says. Okay, get our prepared tin. And we're just going to get our mixture into our tin here. And then at this stage, it's a case of getting it as evenly distributed as possible. So I'm going to kind of crumble it a little bit. I'm going to just start spreading it around the base of the pan until it's like pretty evenly kind of distributed around. And then I can start getting in there with my fingers and pressing it down into the base. Now, it's totally up to you how much time you spend on this. You can also take this and fold it over, this and fold it over, and you can get that job done a little bit faster with this non-stick. And whether that's greaseproof paper or cling film, same thing. Then you don't have to worry about it sticking to your fingers. And you can take as much time on this as you want. You don't have to get it, so it's even, totally up to you. It's your creation. So now that will have done quite a lot of the work in terms of spreading that out. You can use the back of a spoon if you want to get it a little bit more well distributed and just get those like little marks out from where you've pressed. But again, totally optional. You don't have to do this, especially if like you're with the kids doing this. It's just fun for them to do, and that's the most important thing. Okay, so then that's our base spread out. And then from here, we just get our chocolate on top. Now, when you get your chocolate on there, if it's very, very warm, it's going to take longer for the chocolate to set, which doesn't matter. It's just for you to know that. If the chocolate's more towards room temperature at this stage, then it's not going to take quite as long to set. And you can see that that's got some nice drizzle in it. Like that's going to pour quite easily. So you're going to pour your chocolate on top. And we don't want like a crazy thick amount of chocolate here because it's going to be very uneven. Then just swirl that around in the tin. And I like it to just be just covered. So it's a very thin coating of chocolate on top. But if you want it to be slightly thicker than that, you could just add a little bit more chocolate. It's totally up to you how you do this. And now that's completely coated. And from here, if you wanted to, do a little bit of sea salt flakes. I recommend that. You do that. Chopped peanuts, some granola if you have it around. Any kind of texture that you want in there can go on now. And then the nice thing about adding the sea salt flakes on top is that you can kind of distribute it so that you're going to get a little bit of salt in every bite, and that salt lengthens the journey of what you're eating. It's not just there as a trendy thing. A lot of people think that. That's not what the salt is there for. It lengthens the journey. It's a natural flavor enhancer. And then this is the one that I made in preparation for class. I literally made this like a half an hour ago. It takes no time at all to set. I'm going to take that out of the tin, pull down the cling film, and this is from the fridge, not the freezer. And then it's ready. You can cut it up however you'd like at this stage. If you want it to be pretty and clean, because you can see this has some bits on the side and whatnot. If you want to clean it up, all you have to do is trim the edges. Those can be scraps for you and the kids if you want to serve this to someone. And then you'll have a nice clean bark. And you can see how thin that chocolate layer is. So you can, of course, do more chocolate there if you'd prefer. And you can either break it or cut it however you like. And there's your cookie dough bark. And just in the freezer, airtight container so it doesn't get frostbite for as long as you think it's going to stick around, which I don't think is going to be very long. And that is it for that recipe. I mean, super easy, takes about 15 minutes. If we're adding in, well, I yapped a lot. I talked a lot at the start. So that would have been our time for getting everything weighed out. 15-minute situation, very easy. Wonderful to get the kids involved in as well. Next week's is going to be a chocolate cherry cookie dough bark, which is pretty fantastic if I do say so. Cherry season is upon us, so it's a great way to use those cherries up if you're seeing them for sale in the shops, or if we have some that actually grow wildly down the street here. Great way to use cherries and enjoy them during the summer. And we have Bridget saying, lovely, we'll make it right away this weekend. Fantastic. That's awesome. Well, I hope you enjoy it. I'd love to hear how it goes. You can either drop a comment on this video or feel free to email me and let me know how it goes. I'm glad that you're going to enjoy that. Well, I hope you enjoy it anyway, and I'm glad that you're going to make it. Wonderful, guys. It was nice to see you, and hopefully I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.